Imagine you open a door, one you've already opened 1,000 times, but this time you find something you have never seen before. That's how this segment is going to feel. Welcome to Creative Contraband.
Welcome to How to Be a Better DM, the show that helps dungeon masters tell better stories and run more engaging games. This is Creative Contraband, where we take ideas from elsewhere and smuggle them into our craft to take it one step further. And remember, all of this is brought to you by Session Zero Studios.
Hello everyone! Hi and welcome to this new segment for DMs and GMs alike. As you can probably tell by now, not only because of the voice, but because of the accent, I'm not Justin, I'm not Tanner, I am Danny. And the team here at How to Be a Better DM is doing an experiment with this new segment. And because all of this is for you, and we really want to bring more content to you, you are going to get an extra episode on Mondays, where I talk about, well, you heard it in the intro, I talk about what we can learn from other arts or crafts, and bring those knowledges to our table. So, because this is a test, please, if you like this segment, make sure to support it. You can write a comment, you can send me questions, we are going to be answering some of the questions, and all those things. Give us a like, thumbs up, and etc. As I said, I will be your guide today. My name is Daniel, you can call me Danny. And I have been a semi-professional artist for about a decade now. I have worked in magic, theater, and music, so hopefully that experience helps me share something valuable with you. I would bet you have at some point watched a movie where the protagonists are in huge trouble, and then out of nowhere, a solution falls from the sky and saves them from everything. Well, if you have been the game master throwing solutions from the sky, then this episode is for you. And if you haven't, then congratulations! There is still a lot to learn in the next few minutes, so listen closely. Before we get into the topic though, I would like to give you some context about where I'm coming from. I see DMing and TTRPGs as a collaborative art form. So for the next 12 weeks, hopefully more, I will do my best to give you useful information in a way that empowers you and pushes you to be a thinking game master with a wide toolbox to choose from. Dice rolls and rules are your language. They are the words you use, but you need to have something to say. And I'm not talking about some grandiloquent narrative or complex story. You can turn very simple stories into emotive, thoughtful ones with intention, even while having a good laugh. You don't need to run a perfect game to run a meaningful one. At the end of the day, that's what we are looking for. Creating meaningful experiences that will live as long as possible in our players' minds. And hopefully ours too. Okay, so why do ad hoc miraculous solutions feel bad to audiences and players? In short, because they break the balance between players and DM. In tabletop role-playing games, unlike other media forms, the players have agency. They take an active role in shaping the story, and for that to be done in a fair way, they need to have all the key pieces of information that can be useful to them. And if they don't have those pieces, we have to give them at least the possibility to get them. For example, behind an investigation skill check. Knowledge is power. And when the master uses information only he had, or worse, the master makes the information up on the spot, then he's giving himself more power at the cost of player agency. This, of course, does not mean at all that you are not supposed to make stuff up on the spot. This means that the information both sides have determines the power balance or imbalance that is going to happen. This phenomenon explains partially why when you go see a magic show, for example, there are usually hecklers in the audience. Heckling is a way to re-establish the power balance. Even if the magician has a non-confrontational attitude, this is bound to happen sometimes. It's just the way it works, at least in Western culture, I guess. But in literature, this happens too. If you have ever read a Sherlock Holmes book, or one by Agatha Christie, you have read what's called the whodunit genre. The whole point of those books is for the reader to have the same information as the detective, so they can try to solve the mystery just as if they were the detective. Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie were particularly good at that. That's why, among other things, they were so popular. And if they had pulled out some random information from their pockets, you couldn't have had, at the end of the book, what you needed to solve the riddle, and you would probably feel scammed. And that scam, that miraculous, unforeseeable solution, my friends, is called Deus Ex Machina. Not Vox Machina, Ex Machina. And that's what this episode is going to be about. Not only about what Deus Ex Machina is, but about how we can avoid it. There are many, many examples in popular media, from books to movies to actual plays. The Phoenix in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, when the main characters are being attacked by the velociraptors, the rich uncle in Jane Eyre, and so on and so on. As you can probably tell by now, this has a negative connotation, and it usually comes off as lazy writing. For example, in the climax of the first Harry Potter book, Harry is completely defenseless in front of Professor Quirrell. And what happens? The solution appears magically in his pocket, in the form of the stone and skin-burning powers, or something like that. In the climax of the second book, Harry is completely defenseless in front of Tom Marvolo Riddle. And what happens? The solution flies by in the form of a phoenix and brings a sword that magically appears in his hat. In the climax of the fourth book, Harry is struggling in front of Voldemort in a wand duel. And what happens? You guessed it. The solution appears magically once again. This time in the form of family spirits who help him escape from the danger. Some fans argue that it's part of the character's development. Others argue that it's a staple of the genre or whatever. I don't believe any of those things, at least in this particular case. But still, I'll let you know for the sake of transparency. Avoiding this, the Deus Ex Machina, I mean, can be complicated, considering that as GMs, we need to adapt to the different scenarios that rise with every decision our players make. And we don't always have the time or the means to keep everything under control. Nonetheless, we can smuggle some knowledge from theater and films to solve this issue in our D&D sessions. Just as a disclaimer, I am going to use DM and GM interchangeably, and D&D is a way to talk about all TTRPGs, or most of them, at the very least. So, yeah. We will now go over 3 concepts, or 3 solutions maybe, that will give you tons of flexibility to work with. The first of our concepts will be foreshadowing. I bet you already heard about foreshadowing somewhere. This is a narrative device in which warnings or suggestions about future events are dropped or planted. What do I mean by that? Let's go over some famous examples. There will be spoilers, but only for stuff released more than 20 years ago, so we should be okay. Number 1. In the movie Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, the main character Norman Bates kills his mother, unbeknownst to the audience, and he keeps her mummified in his living room. Well, before we get that information, Norman says in a line of dialogue, "My mother is as harmless as one of those stuffed birds." This, in hindsight, is a hint of the director trying to tell us that she's literally as one of those stuffed birds. Number 2. In The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf tells Frodo that he has a hunch. He thinks Gollum will play a very important role in the destruction of the One Ring. Said and done, of course. Without Gollum, Frodo would have just succumbed to the power of the ring. But as we know, both of them struggled right at the edge of the cliff, and then the ring fell into the lava, just as Gandalf said. And number 3, in the movie The Incredibles, the first one, Edna Mode tells the family not to wear capes because they are dangerous. Guess what element makes the BBEG of the movie die in his final scene? So, those are some examples, but how can you use that in your sessions? Let's see some hypothetical scenarios. The most straightforward example is to have an oracle or a fortune teller tell the party something about their future. Maybe even something unhinged they don't really believe. If the time comes and you want to make that happen, you now have a way more robust background to pull that off. Another scenario. If you want the BBEG to, for example, kill the store owner that your party befriended, and you think it would be too arbitrary to make that happen out of nowhere, then maybe the party found another store owner killed by the BBEG when they came to the town. That will make the story feel more cohesive and planned, even if there is no rational reason for store owners specifically to be killed. I will say that one more time. This will make the story feel more cohesive, more planned. What else? Maybe you want to kidnap the wizard of your party so the local people can tell your party that a young wizard was kidnapped not long ago. That kind of stuff. One last scenario, you can make a character dream about something that symbolizes what will come, or could come. Maybe if the party needs to go underground, for example, the barbarian dreams that she can't breathe, or she can't see anything because of the darkness. Remember that you are planting these ideas only to give you better flexibility or more flexibility in the future. These seeds don't need to grow, and in a long campaign, most will very likely be forgotten. But the one or two that were actually helpful will make you look like a masterful DM, like you had it all planned. Players will feel that even though they have all the freedom in the world, maybe they can't escape destiny. Just as in the old Greek tragedies like Oedipus the king. On the other hand, what if we plant elements instead of ideas? Then what we have is the Chekhov's gun. I will twist this concept a little bit to make it fit into what we need, but it is an idea that originates in theater, and it basically says, if a gun appears on stage in the first act, it must be shot in the third. Meaning that if we invest time and attention in an element, it has to impact the story, or else it seems like wasted effort. In this context though, what we will do is plant many Chekhov's guns in hopes of our players triggering some of them in the third act. Of course, we can trigger the guns too, if we need to, but it works better if the players themselves do it. For example, have you ever built an encounter or a challenge for your players and they solved it through items or abilities you didn't even remember they had? Well, basically, we will encourage that by planting small stuff that can seem useless at the time, but that hopefully can be triggered at some point. It is worth mentioning that players can also plan these for themselves, be it via backstory, buying stuff at a market, character flaws, offhand comments, etc., etc. If you, as the DM, find a way to trigger their guns, you got a jackpot. So, let's go with some examples. Number 1, according to a Reddit user, I know that's not necessarily the most reliable source there is, but according to a Reddit user, one review about Back to the Future said, "Nobody says anything that doesn't turn out to be critical to the plot later on." I will leave the fact-checking to you. Something similar happens with the movie Hot Fuzz, I think it's called. Number 2, in the first episode of Breaking Bad's last season, there is a machine gun, which, according to Vince Gilligan, the director himself, was intentionally meant to be forgotten by the audience. As you might already know, this machine gun is crucial for the end of the series. And number 3, another The Incredibles example. In the first movie, we have the human version of this device, and it's called a Chekhov's gunman. Not Chekhov's gun, but Chekhov's gunman. And it is the neglected little kid in the beginning, because he becomes the villain at the end. So as you can see, this technique is all about working in advance. Now, before I move into the hypothetical D&D scenarios, I need to make a special shout out to Seinfeld here. I don't know if you know it, Seinfeld, the 80s, 90s sitcom. Well, it's amazing. It has won many awards. But every episode is a constant stream of Chekhov's guns that all get together in the end to build the outcome of the episode. So if you want some suggestions, I'm going to leave some episodes, and I assure you, I promise, you will perfectly understand what this technique is about. So, the 3 episodes are the 7th episode of the 3rd season, called The Cafe. The 11th episode of the 7th season, called The Rye. And the 5th episode of the 7th season, called The Hot Tub. So, very recommended, because you're not only gonna learn a lot, but it's also a really good series, especially in its prime. Okay, so how can you use this in a session? Let's go with some examples. Number 1, I once mastered a mouse reader one-shot and gave a player a bucket of lard. Yes, a bucket of lard. And I did that mostly as a joke. But it turns out he later used that to burn the BB-8 to flames. That game has no rules for flame damage, because it's not D&D. But it was amazing. I, of course, went with the rule of cool. I let that happen, and I mean, we had a blast. The table was... we were all so happy. What else? You can have a rebel vigilante tell the party that he roams through the forest, for example, or through whatever, looking for food and helping the ones in need. And then if the party is in a battle that gets out of hand, you can pull the trigger and bring the vigilante back for help. Finally, we will talk about failing forward. At the beginning, I talked about avoiding miraculous solutions and hinting at things to make outcomes feel fairer. But do we need solutions at all? The action or narrative shouldn't stop because of a party's failure, ever. We can take the story in a different direction and make the outcome interesting. This is a very valuable lesson from improv. Let's turn every failure into a stepping stone. So, let's go through some examples. If your party is getting wrecked by a foe, instead of killing the party, you can turn them into prisoners and make the next adventure a dungeon escape, for example. Or, if a character needs to climb a wall and they fail the skill check, don't leave them waiting next to the wall, of course. You can give them other options, like breaking the wall, but that's a topic for a different episode. Failing forward would be to make their character climb the wall and fail in such a way that the wall breaks for example, and uncover something behind it. A cave, a passage, a piece of information, a map, etc. So they fail at doing what they needed to do, but you're making the story advance. You're putting new things out there so they can use them. And number 3, and this is more of a side note, the TTRPG Gumshoe solves the issue of getting stuck not finding clues. It's a mystery, a detective tabletop role-playing game, as you can probably notice by the name. It solves this issue in a very interesting way, because when you're looking for clues, you can, of course, get stuck not finding them. Even if you know where to look for them, that happens. Let's say for a moment that this situation is comparable to the wall climbing one. In this system, in the Gumshoe system, you find clues just by looking for them. You never roll for them, because that implies that you can fail at finding something that is unskippable for the story to go forward, even if you know exactly where to look and what to look for. It would be ridiculous if you knew what you need to find, you knew where to find it, and then you roll a 1 and you can find it. So, going back to D&D, one could say that if you figure out that the right thing to do is to climb the wall, and if it is the only way forward, then the character must be able to climb it, so you don't get stuck. So, in such a situation, maybe translating the failure into a success with consequences, even if harsh, is the best way to go. Well, in conclusion, describing thoroughly, and please don't exaggerate though, no one wants to listen to a dungeon master yap for 15 minutes. But describing is very useful, not only for immersion, but also for planting small elements and pieces of information along the way that can help you in the future. With practice, you will find the balance needed to plant elements without making it overwhelming for the players. And remember, you don't need to use everything in the end. I'm gonna say that again, you don't need to use everything in the end. So don't be scared of planting lots of stuff. Think of it as building a safety net that you can fall back on when things get difficult. Still, if you want to try other options, you can find interviews in YouTube where Matt Mercer mentions alternatives that work quite well. There is, of course, still lots to say about these techniques, and these are far from a perfect solution, but they are still very powerful tools to have in your belt. So, at the end of each episode, I will give you a word or quote that you might know or not, but that I think can help you level up your descriptions and inner world as an artist or a game master. The intro to the segment will sound something like this. Today's word is magnanimous, which means generous or forgiving, especially towards a rival or less powerful person. The word comes from Latin, magna anima, which means big soul. So it's the perfect word to describe, for example, a king or even a gesture. Oh, wow, you spared my life. That's such a magnanimous gesture. That's also a way to use it. Before I say goodbye, I want to thank you all for staying until the end. I deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate it. If you liked the episode, please leave a comment or let us know through social media so this segment can keep going. In the end, you, member of the audience, will be the one who decides if Creative Contraband lives on or not. So your opinion is essential. I will also choose questions from the audience and answer them at the beginning of every episode. When you hear this, then you will know the time has come to answer the questions. So if you have any thoughts or doubts about today's topic, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. And remember, there are lessons in every craft, and I want to bring them all to your table. So thanks again, and we'll be back next time with another handcrafted episode. But until then, let's roll initiative.
This is Creative Contraband, brought to you by Session Zero Studios.